Welcome to Iceland. My name is Gylfi, your honest Icelandic guide, and today's journey takes us to the village of Raufarhöfn on the northeast corner of our island. And as often before, we start with the question, what do Icelanders think of when Raufarhöfn is mentioned? And this time the response might be a bit unpleasant, since so many and perhaps too many Icelanders are familiar with a poem portraying the village as rotten, filthy, with so many mud puddles that not even the devil himself can find enough names for them all. And this dark poem has frankly not done much for the local tourism. So was it just a sarcastic, unnecessary joke, or did Raufarhöfn deserve the reputation? And how is the village doing today? Does it have a bright future or any future at all? And there is only one way to find out, so welcome to Raufarhöfn. I'm going to start with a brief geography lesson and travel tips, since Raufarhöfn is located at the northeastern tip of Melrakkaslétta Plain, which translates to the plain of the Arctic fox. And when we put Raufarhöfn in context with better-known tourist attractions, the map looks like this. This is Akureyri, the capital of North Iceland. From there it takes us only an hour to drive to Húsavík, the whale-watching capital of the north, and from Húsavík it takes us less than an hour to drive to the well-known megaflood formation Ásbyrgi. And from Ásbyrgi it takes us less than an hour to drive to Raufarhöfn. And I'm starting the town visit with a wide shot and a little history lesson. The name Raufarhöfn is derived from the coastal landscape that creates this naturally sheltered harbor that opens toward the Arctic Ocean, and this is where Hanseatic merchants and later Dutch traders found a safe haven to use as a gathering point, long before any settlement developed around here. And the formal transformation for Raufarhöfn into a hub only began in the 19th century, when the village was officially designated as a trading post by Danish authorities. And while the early settlement remained modest, the excellent harbor and its location was the sole reason for a huge transformation during Iceland's herring fishery boom in the 1940s and the 1950s. And these were no ordinary times around here. By 1961, Raufarhöfn was one of the largest herring export ports in Iceland, with as many as 11 factories operating simultaneously. During peak seasons, the village population swelled from a few hundred permanent residents to around 3,000 people. So those were the golden years. This period brought unprecedented prosperity, reshaping the community's economy and identity, while this tiny village was responsible for up to 10% of Iceland's export. That is how big they became. And that was not to last. By the late 1960s, overfishing led to the collapse of the herring stocks, and the economic foundation of the village simply vanished. And the collapse of Raufarhöfn was especially bad. The herring era left behind an immense amount of trash, decaying docks and factories. And these leftovers were often owned by bankrupt companies, so in many cases cleanup was impossible due to complications. So the herring era, it literally left the town to rot. And it has in fact taken them over 50 years to clean up the mess. And first they had to transition back towards traditional coastal fishing. And that story was not simple or easy. And I was actually a small part of the local industrial history, as I have relatives in the area. So I came twice to work here in the local fish factory. And that was when I was only 14 years old. and I actually loved being here. Back then, salaries were paid every Friday. Someone from the office would walk over to the factory with handwritten payslips stapled to brown envelopes containing cash. And some weeks, the envelopes just didn't arrive. There wasn't enough money, and that instability perhaps best describes the post-Herring history. In the early 1970s, the village had a population of around 400, and that number has dwindled to 180. And it's an aging population as well. And they might have hit rock bottom perhaps 10, 15 years ago, when houses here sold for a very, very low price, when the situation seemed absolutely hopeless. However, a local company in the fishing industry has been doing a commendable job providing welcoming facilities for boats and fishermen, resulting in plenty of work now. So there are hardly any properties for sale, which is a good measure for examining the status of the village. However, this village is still significantly impacted by the Herring era, and they are still trying to reinvent their identity. And as for the conditions to develop tourism service here, they are in many ways much more difficult than elsewhere in Iceland. The first obstacle is the rural location, far away from the mainstream traffic that comes with highway number 1. And as for the climate, it's potentially more of a drag when it comes to Icelandic tourists, because we see it every day in the weather news, how this location differs a lot from the rest of the country. For example, 2 years ago, the Met Office made this unprecedented weather forecast. It was so unusual that I took this screenshot, and I might even be able to sell this screenshot as an NFT, since this might never happen again, or the day when the best weather in Iceland was expected to be in Raufarhöfn. I am, however, an optimist by nature, and always try to see new opportunities and challenges in all situations. Where others might see a pile of rusty old machinery, I might see the ideal movie set for a Netflix drama. And the village Raufarhöfn offers many excellent and actually totally free movie backdrops. And just recently, the local people found a way to use the old fish oil tanks. And the government picked up the checkbook to pay the bill, to make doors on the tanks, because the sound inside is like nothing else. So this will be usable as a small concert hall and other cultural events in future. And this is actually a part of a government project aimed to support villages that are considered to be fragile, like this village is. And after a paint job, the tanks will hopefully represent a brighter future, rather than the downfalls of the past. And tourism has always been practiced here in some form, like service for anglers is likely the oldest business. There are many good fishing lakes nearby where it's possible to be trout fishing 24/7 for a very low price, and we can actually find a good salmon river in the area as well. So fishing and hiking in the wilderness has been the heart and soul of the local tourism over the last decades. Not big business, but enough to keep the local hotel going. And the name of the hotel, Hotel Norðurljós, or Hotel Northern Lights, was ahead of its time when it comes to marketing, long before the tourism industry knew anything about the potentials of Northern Light photography as a business model. And the village is, of course, an excellent location for Northern Light gazing, since there are so few mountains around. And many years ago, it was a local hotel manager that came up with the idea to set up the so-called Arctic Hens. And while he lived, he pushed that project to what it is today. And this rock formation that consists of stone arches and statues was inspired by Norse mythology and arranged to capture the light of the midnight sun as it moves across the sky, and on summer solstice it aligns perfectly with the south arch. and it's already a popular backdrop for Northern Light photography. And due to the uniqueness of Raufarhöfn being so close to the northernmost tip of the country, we can use it as a very creative backdrop for summer solstice photography, time lapses, and such maneuvers. And I have actually mentioned in other unrelated videos that the Melrakkaslétta Plain is probably one of the most underrated locations in the country during the summer solstice. It's the time when it's possible to film a time-lapse like this, when the sun never sets, and the time frame to do so is actually several days, not just this one evening, or to get results like this when the sun is following the horizon. And this was shot on a location around 10 minutes north of the village, and I'm leaving a link to it in the video description. It's perhaps around 5 kilometers south of the Arctic Circle, and the only other way to film so far north in Iceland would be the island Grímsey. And since it's an island, it leaves us with way less option as for transportation, like if we have to move around to stay away from clouds. So when we get clear skies around here the week before or after summer solstice, this is a magical place, and actually like no other place on earth. And now is the time to correct a common misunderstanding about the northernmost tip of Iceland. It was always believed to be a little peninsula called Raunhafnartangi, but it is in fact the next peninsula to the west, Rifstangi. That is the northernmost tip of Iceland, if we don't include the island Grímsey. And for those who want to visit the new northernmost tip of Iceland, it's only possible on foot, and it's a rocky path, so I would not go walking there with expensive camera gear unless you are well prepared on good shoes. And further west, we find the Rauðinúpur Cliffs, yet another adventure for bird lovers. And when I place my drone around here, we get this white autumn view over the plain where almost every farm has been abandoned, which is a bit sad because this was and still is good grazing land for sheep. So can tourism come to the rescue? And since I'm realistic, I'm going to say that tourism can definitely help. This region has so much wilderness to offer, and they have never promoted themselves properly, in my opinion. And the demand for untouched wilderness will only increase. So let's see how my usual TripAdvisor test turned out. And it came actually out better than one might expect for a town of this size. I found 3 places to stay, although the Northern Light Hotel won't open until April. And as for attractions, it was a fun experiment to compare this village with the nearby village Þórshöfn that I covered in my last video, where no one seemed to have heard of TripAdvisor, and not even the local museum was listed there. While here in Raufarhöfn, they even listed the bouncing bubble under things to do, and I like this kind of mentality. TripAdvisor does, however, not tell the whole story, and there is a little coffee shop in town that never seems to be open when I'm around, so I can't comment on the service there. But from the outside, it's very photogenic, and I always find the village to be very inspiring for storytelling. It has an old and rusty soul with an abundance of tales. And the local social center, it has a bar now. And the bar is not listed on TripAdvisor, so I guess it's only open when the local people get thirsty or when they get together to celebrate something. And they have actually a soccer field with artificial grass. They have a little indoor swimming pool, campsite, and all these activities are, of course, listed on TripAdvisor. But due to the aging population, the school is not very busy nowadays. So they have actually infrastructure to accommodate a much larger population. It is now possible to go on guided kayak tours. I think it's a new company, and that is a business that fits the village, although I would personally prefer to be able to go sea angling, and in my opinion, the tourism should grow around what they know best. Clean nature, fishing, birds, or where the local tourism originated. And the villages like Raufarhöfn should never pretend to be anything else than what they are. What you see is what you get, and even what you don't see is what you get, because there is so much fog around here quite often. And when I arrived to film this video, first in the summer of 2024, the fog had arrived before me, but I filmed anyway and decided to wait for a better chance to do the town justice. And that chance came just weeks later when I received an invitation. And not only did I get decent weather for the occasion, I had a wonderful time with the family that I had lived with during the years I worked here. And the whole town joined the festivities. So this video has, of course, a little bonus feature in the end, or local festivities with local music. And I have to admit that it took me a while to decide what kind of approach I should use in making this episode, because the look of the village has often been the subject of mockery. And I'm, of course, teasing them a little bit. And my final decision was to change nothing, just be myself, as I always do. And during this visit for the festivities, I had the chance to talk to a local business owner who mentioned an Icelandic TV station crew that filmed the town recently, and the final cut was a very negative portrayal that had little to do with the soul of the village. It was just the easy way to edit one side of the story and even just one side of the houses. And this reminded me of the power of narrative, how we can twist it in any way we want. Pick the outcome first and then pick the filming subjects to fit the narrative. For example, there is this one street in a village where many of the worst houses happen to be, and it's my own choice whether if I choose to make that bit of footage look negative for the community or something else, because we have someone walking into the frame here, and this someone might perhaps be one of the lucky guys that made a good deal. He got a house for cheap and is now helping out to make a new identity for the village. And in this case, I honestly don't know how that story is, but looks are deceiving. And it's easy to make this bit of footage look like the end of something or the beginning of something. But I can, however, say that there is an obvious transformation going on now. And I honestly think that they have a good future, although the village might never grow large again. And one of the basics that they finally got is the fiber optic. That makes it easier to work from home, where the housing cost is perhaps the lowest in the country. The roads have been getting better, and we are close to very strong tourist attractions like Ásbyrgi and the Dettifoss waterfall, midst in wonderful and clean Arctic nature, where the sun never sets over the summer, where the trees come to die if someone is stupid enough to plant them here. And my next town video will be online soon. I'm already working on it, since this is a large project that will by time cover all villages in Iceland, and of course the tourist attractions that we find between the villages, and even many of the roads. And there are links in the video description and on the screen now for those who can support this project of mine that will hopefully by time become one of the largest video information source about Iceland out there. And with that, and this little party bonus from the social center in Raufarhöfn, I'm sending you best regards from my home country, Iceland.